So in an earlier lesson, I mentioned tritone substitution. That's something we're going to get into today. It's a really good subject, and it's something that can give you double the amount of options on any of your dominant chords. As we make our way through the lesson, we're going to start to apply some of these ideas to Kenny Burrell's G Baby Ain't I Good to You, and look at some nice ways to accompany that sort of a jazz blues piece. So, step 1, organise your 3-note voicings for dominant chords. Let's take a C7 chord and let's build it off the E string. Here's your root note at the 8th fret. We're going to kill the A string. Then we have the 8th fret of the D string and the 9th fret of the G string. So here's your 3-note voicing for a C7 when it's rooted on the E string. Some people call these shell chords as well. Same thing. Root, flat 7, 3rd. Make sure you practice all the possible fingerings for this shape. I quite like to play it on these last 3 fingers quite often. But also practice playing it on strange combinations. Get the thumb involved. Practice every way you can think of so you're ready to grab it in the moment, because who knows where you'll be coming from to land that shape. Now let's find the same chord rooted on the A string. 3rd fret, there's your root, there's C. 2nd fret of the D string is your major 3rd. 3rd fret of the G string is your flattened 7th. And again, practice that with different fingerings. With this one you can see how it's really just the lower 3 notes of your standard C7 voicing. As always with chords or any new material, one of the best ways to get used to switching between these shapes is to apply it to a cycle of fourths. Let's start with the C7 off the E string, and then go up a fourth to F7 off the A string, then up a fourth to B flat 7 off the E string, E flat 7 off the A string, A flat 7, D flat 7, G flat 7, B7, move all the way up to the 12th fret, E7, A7, D7, G7, back home, C7. That's all 12 of them. Now let's try that with some rhythm. Let's do 4 beats per chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's try to apply this concept of tritone substitution. Take your C7, think only about the root note. Find a note that's a tritone away from it. Whether you go up or down to find it, you'll end up at the same place. Tritone is 3 whole tones. So here we go. Here's C, a whole tone down, 2 whole tones, 3 whole tones, G flat. Now just to demonstrate the point here, if we go up 3 whole tones, we'll also end up at G flat. Here's C, whole tone, whole tone, whole tone, up to G flat. So you can't go wrong. Whether you go up or down, you'll find the correct note. Now in terms of just guitaristic shapes and things that fall comfortably on the instrument, really you can just think about these diagonal lines. On the A string, there's your G flat, C, G flat. Continue down, you get C again. Continue again, you get G flat again. Now there is a really good simple way to look at your tritones, just as a diagonal line. You know, the guitar is such a shape-based instrument, we should really embrace that and simplify sometimes. I know players like Joe Pass and Barney Kessel used to just think in terms of diagonal lines when they were applying tritone. If we were to take a C7 and change the root note to the note a tritone away, but keep the other 2 notes of your chord, you're going to end up with this. G flat 7 rooted off the A string. Notice how these 2 notes are unchanged. So C, B flat and E becomes G flat, B flat and E. An interesting thing to notice here is that the top 2 notes have switched over in terms of their intervals. So where we had with the C7, the D string we had the flat 7 and the G string we had the 3rd. Now for the G flat 7, they've swapped over. You've got the 3rd on the D string and the flat 7 on the G string. Now Joe Pass would have you just sit there and do this. And there is a lot of sense to that. Just create a muscle memory, almost Pavlovian response. When you see this, immediately think of this as a viable option. So the great thing is it's completely reversible, right? If we were on G flat 7, looking for the tritone substitution, we'd go to C7. Just to hear how pretty these tritones can sound, let's try them on a 2-5-1 in F. G minor 7, C7, tritone, resolved to an F major. Let's try it down the other end. Really good. Evening guys, realised I totally forgot to go through something that's kind of important, so here we go. So when we're moving through a cycle of fourths and we apply the tritone substitutions, essentially the substitute chord is always going to just be simply a semitone above your destination chord. So it's really just like go one fret above where you intend to go and drop onto it. Sounds pretty cool, and it's a great exercise. You'll get to use that kind of thing quite a bit in tunes, especially in like the B sections of a lot of standards where you're moving through a cycle of fourths on dominant chords. Rhythm changes being a good example. Okay, back to the daytime. Now let's take the A section of Kenny Burrell's version of G Baby Ain't I Good To You. Maybe get a pen and paper ready for this and write down the changes. C7, A flat 7, G7, back to C7, F7, B flat 7, resolve to E flat major. We'll use one of our triads from an earlier lesson. And then G7, and then we'll go around the whole thing again, but with all the shapes down this end. C7, A flat 7, G7, C7, F7, B flat 7, resolve to the E flat. So all together, that sounds like this. 3, 4. Do take note of the fact that there's a nice little cycle of fourths happening within that sequence. C, F, B flat, E flat. Recognizing when those things are happening makes it so much easier to memorize tunes because you're thinking of an entire chain of chords in one fell swoop. Okay, now I'm going to apply some tritones to that. See if you can spot where they're happening first of all, and then we'll go into a bit more detail. 3, 4. Did you spot them all? No worries if not, we can break it down into a bit of detail here. So C7, we left that untouched. Same for the A flat 7, but then where we had 2 beats of G7 in the original sequence, we're now splitting that in half and doing 1 beat of G7 and 1 beat on its tritone substitute to takes us to C7, where again, instead of doing 2 beats, we split the time in half, do 1 beat of C7, 1 beat on its tritone. F7, same idea, 1 beat of F, 1 beat on the tritone. B flat 7, 1 beat, then 1 beat on its tritone, resolving to E flat. So we're basically getting a ton of extra chords in there. If we were to name every chord, it would sound pretty busy. You'd have C7, A flat 7, G7, D flat 7, C7, G flat 7, F7, B7, B flat 7, E7, E flat, G7. And then we did the same here, G7 to D flat 7, before going back to the start of the sequence down in that lower range. C7, A flat 7, G, tritone, C, tritone, F, B flat, E flat. Now obviously we've thrown everything in there just as an exercise for the sake of getting it under the fingers, but in reality you'd be more tasteful with it, use it as and when you choose. Essentially it adds a nice little passing chord into your next change every time. Now, like all subjects, this stuff is really expansive and we can take it as far as we want. That's just the starting point, getting your 3-note voicings all lined up so that you can comfortably switch between your standard chord and its tritone substitute. Now remember that one of the many reasons it's so important to be really comfortable with your 3-note voicings is that these things are like a starting point for all of your chord sequences. You know, these lay the groundwork, and you can then look at adding things on the B string or the top E string as well, you know, but the 3-note voicing will stay there in the foundation of the chord. And if you can see sequences that way, it makes everything look very clear. Okay, so let's take a 3-note voicing and let's figure out what we can add to it on the other strings. So take your C7. The first and most obvious thing to add to it would be the 8th fret of the B string. You can do that by hooking your thumb or by playing it this way. Again, practice both. You'll need both. The note we've added there is nothing fancy. Doesn't even affect the name of the chord. It's just the natural 5th. If we stay with natural extensions for the moment, what we call diatonic extensions, we could also add the 6th, which on a dominant chord we refer to that as a 13. You could also chuck the 9 in on top of that, so you could have the 13 with a 9. And any combination of those things. You've also got the root on the top string if you wanted it, so you could have a 13 with the root on top. That's really nice as well. Or the 5th on the B string with the 9 on top. So many options even without leaving the scale. But then we can also look at alterations, which is taking notes from a scale and sharpening or flattening them. Let's take the 5 and sharpen it. C7 sharp 5. Now to really hear this chord in context, we need to allow it to function correctly. So this would be the 5 and it would resolve to a 1, F. So let's do C7 sharp 5 and resolve to F major of some sort. I've gone for F6-9 here. Or up to F major 7. F6. What about flattening the 5? As with all of these chords, practice different fingerings, thumb or no thumb. C7 flat 5, that's kind of a tense sounding one. Of course, hearing this in context is going to make it sound much prettier. Let's chuck it into a 2-5-1. Right, so now let's see what we can add on to the top E string. We could start with the root. We could have a flat 9, a natural 9, a sharp 9. Of course, you want to try all of these things out in great detail, seeing what you prefer the sound of. Everything's going to sound different depending on the context, so don't judge something immediately if it sounds weird off the bat. There'll be some context where that will sound like the perfect choice every time. Let's try a flat 9. Let's just take one example. C7 flat 9, resolving to F6 9. It's good to try and incorporate a bit of voice leading in your changes, so you're hearing notes connect to the next logical place. What about flat 9 with the sharp 5 on the B string? That's a really good one as well. What about sharp 5 on the B string with a sharp 9 on the top E? That was a bit of both. I did sharp 9, flat 9 to the 1, to the F. Okay, so what about the other position? So let's take an F7 off the A string. I'll go through these ones a little quicker. 9 on the B, or sharp 9, or flat 9, or root. It gives you that simple C7 type of open chord shape again. On the top E string, that's where you've got your 5s. I've got the 9 on the B string here, by the way. 9, and then 5 on top, sharp 5, flat 5, 13, same thing as a 6. Got a lot of options to explore there. Let me just chuck you a couple of examples. But again, this is stuff you've got to explore very slowly for yourself. Get a pen and paper, write down all your favourite combinations. So here's F13, returning just to a plain F9, and then resolving to B flat major 7. Because F in this case would be functioning as 5, therefore it's going to resolve to 1 B flat. What about 13 but with a flat 9 on the B string? I really like this one. And again, mixtures of these kinds of things. Notice how there I left the A string out entirely. The sharp 5. Pretty spicy, that one. Now, this is where something really interesting will crop up if we apply the tritone thinking again. Take this F7, the one that just had the root on the B string, and imagine you're going to tritone sub the bass note from F to B. You'll end up with one of the shapes we looked at a few minutes ago. This would be a B7 with the flat 5 on top now. And again, that's going to resolve to B flat, because this is taking the place of the F7. That's where, again, this flat 5 sound, although out of context can sound a bit jarring, in context it's absolutely gorgeous. So you might have something like this, a 2-5-1 in B flat. So you can see there's a lot of stuff to explore with that. What I'm going to do soon is a video on jazz turnarounds where we'll apply all of this stuff again, using a lot of tritone stuff. We'll get some of those beautiful Barney Kessel sounds. Again, featuring that flat 5. So yeah, stick around, subscribe, like, comment, do all of that stuff. It really helps. And I'll see you soon.